It's a great bill. I want to thank all of you for working with us in this. And Madam Chairman, again, I want to thank Ms. Bicker and I want to thank Ms. Waters for their excellent work, for a job well done. And the people of this country thank you, too, that we can pay our insurance on installment.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois rise?
Madam Chairman, may I inquire the Chair how much time each side has remaining?
The gentlewoman from Illinois has 20 minutes. The gentlewoman from California has 16.5 minutes.
Thank you. With that, I would yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Michigan, Candace Miller.
The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, and I certainly thank the gentlelady for yielding some time to me, and I hate to rain on this bipartisan parade. I know this is a bipartisan effort here, but I think this program needs to be eliminated, not be reformed. And I would start with this basic premise. Why in the world is the federal government in the flood insurance business? If you read the Constitution, what does it say? Actually, in the preamble, it says the first and foremost responsibility of the federal government is to provide for the common defense. I can't find anywhere in that Constitution it says we're supposed to be in the federal flood insurance business. I just can't find it. And I'll tell you what, this thing, I know we're trying to reform what I think is a unnecessary, boondoggle, ridiculous program, but rather than reforming it, as I say, I think it needs to be eliminated. This program started in '68. We started writing policies in 1972. And the FEMA administrator just recently testified, I believe before the Financial Services Committee, had said this thing is good. This federal flood insurance program is in debt. As has been mentioned here, it's almost $18 billion in debt, and we have to raise the debt ceiling for the federal flood insurance program to about $25 billion. And the FEMA administrator is telling us it is always going to be in debt, forever, massive debt. The biggest issue facing the Congress today is what we are going to do about the $14 trillion in debt we currently are faced with and raising the debt ceiling for that. And as we're struggling with all of this, it is almost ludicrous to me that we are talking about raising the debt ceiling on a program that the federal government should not be based at, not be involved in. And one of the reasons that it's not doing particularly well is, guess what? Big surprise. The federal government is probably not the best insurance agent in the world. I mean, when you see that 1% of the policyholders are getting 40% of the claims, something is seriously wrong. And I'm going to be offering an amendment shortly to eliminate this program, and I'll speak more to it at that time. Thanks for the time.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Madam Chairwoman, I would like to yield to the gentleman from Texas 3 minutes. He has worked very hard to make sure that we open up communications with communities that are located in areas where flood insurance rate maps have not been updated in 20 years. He's worked hard on this. I yield to the gentleman 3 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I want to thank Congresswoman Waters for her courteousness and, of course, her leadership on this issue. I also want to thank the subcommittee chairwoman Biggert, also Financial Services Chairman Bacos and Ranking Member Frank for their bipartisan work on this piece of legislation. I consulted with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on my amendment. I believe this will be included en bloc with other amendments. Homeowners, businesses, and regions throughout the country are hit by flood disaster every year. And I understand that in such traumatic and desperate times, our communities must be prepared and equipped with the most up-to-date information and resources. I've repeatedly met with my constituents and district county judges, especially Judge Eloy Vera from Stark County in South Texas, who experienced flooding issues recently. I learned that flood zone maps had not been updated for decades, and this hampered economic development when they were struck by a flood recently. The reasons for outdated maps vary, and maps from the 1970s are not uncommon. But there is a need to strengthen the relationship between entities that handle flood insurance maps to address regional concerns. My amendment is simple and bipartisan. It encourages FEMA, state emergency agencies, localities to increase communications to resolve outstanding issues, and provide necessary tailored information in an effort to decrease the prevalence of outdated flood zone maps. Flood-threatened areas with outdated flood zone maps are not only contradictory, but can result in serious problems for the region. Increasing FEMA state-local relationships is a practical and effective way to assist communities and ensure a steady process to modernize flood maps. So we're ready when a disaster strikes, and therefore I urge support for my common sense amendment that will be included in block. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
I yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from North Dakota, Mr. Berg.
The gentleman from North Dakota is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. It's been a very tough spring for North Dakota, as well as many other districts along these overflowing rivers. Unprecedented flooding has devastated many communities, leaving property destroyed and thousands without homes and hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland flooded. Roads and bridges are severely damaged as well. This year's flooding is unusual, both in the scope of its damage as well as how long the flooding has lasted. Many North Dakotans purchased flood insurance to be prepared for the flood and to protect themselves and their families from the losses that these floods cause. Unfortunately, FEMA's current policy fails to account for a long-lasting flood event, like the one that we've seen along the Missouri River. I support the 30-day waiting period. If individuals purchase insurance 30 days before their property is damaged, they should be protected, regardless of when FEMA declares a flood in progress. That declaration could be counties or even states away, or that's unexpectedly worsened by the Corps' decision to increase the outflows from dams and flooded rivers upstream, and doing this with very little warning. The Terry Berg Amendment would protect these individuals who have played by the rules. We need responsible policies that help plan for the uncertainty of natural disasters. We also need to protect and help the people. So I urge my colleagues to support these victims by voting in favor of this amendment.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I'm pleased to recognize the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Waltz, to talk about his part of the amendment that we're now debating. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the ranking.
For how long is the gentleman recognized?
3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yes.
The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you to the ranking member for the work on this, and to the chairwoman of the subcommittee. Thank you for coming together, creating a process that allowed us to interact and work for our constituents. Recognizing the gentleman from North Dakota, I have actually been on those flood flights that he's experiencing, and I'm very appreciative of what he brought forward. But today I have a pretty simple amendment, I think, that addresses a real issue that we're having. Over the past decade, there have been two real changes to the levee system that protects our communities in this country. The first, of course, was FEMA increasing the amount of information and the due diligence they're doing on recertification of levees. That's appropriate so after Hurricane Katrina. Secondly, the private engineering firms that perform the recertifications are facing astronomically increased costs from their private insurers. No one wants to insure a levee in a flood-prone area other than the rest of the community, thus the government. Together, these two changes have added increasingly high costs to our local communities as they're trying to protect their residents and keep their levees up to standards. It's created an extra burden on these communities that they can ill afford. This amendment offers a solution. The Army Corps of Engineers stands ready and able to perform these levee certifications. In many cases, they built the levees. They can do it at significantly reduced cost to the local communities. But under legislation passed in the 2000 Water Resources Development Act, state and local communities cannot hire the Corps of Engineers to do the work. They must first go to private contractors. It's exactly what happened in my town of Mankato, Minnesota. The North Mankato levee, which was designed and built by the Corps, needed to be recertified because of these changes. Because they couldn't use the Corps of Engineers, our local officials had to scramble and go out of their way to find a private contractor willing to do the work at an added cost of tens of thousands of dollars. At no fault to the private contractors, only their insurance of liability was so high they had to pass the cost on to the local communities. This approach was worked on in the last Congress with then Representative Bozeman, now Senator Bozeman. It has the support of the National Association of Counties, the National League of Cities, and the National Associations of Towns and Townships. And here's the good thing. The Congressional Budget Office has certified this amendment will cost nothing to the taxpayers. Our taxpayers on the local level are paying far more as it is. This is a way to get it right, use the Corps that we already have, save taxpayer monies, increase the efficiencies of our levies, and reduce the claims that are made by this. I urge my colleagues to support this piece of legislation and once again thank the committee for their outstanding work on the underlying bill. And I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
Madam Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry.
The gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I want to thank the gentlelady from Illinois and the entire Financial Services Committee for working with us on this amendment and recognizing the tragedy and disaster that's currently occurring along the Missouri River in my constituents all the way, my constituents in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri. What occurred here is that at the beginning when they started realizing there was going to be flooding and the Corps had to run the traps through the dam system, one government agency started telling people downriver, buy flood insurance. Then FEMA steps in and sets a start of flood or flood in progress date that nullified what the constituents and people bought. Now, what the Terry Berg amendment does would protect those individuals during a flood in progress if the individual has purchased flood insurance and has not sustained damage or loss of property within that 30-day window. That's the clear language of the policies that they were purchasing that had been nullified by FEMA's declaration. This amendment does not dispute the 30-day waiting period, which is designed to discourage people from waiting until a flood is imminent to buy insurance. It simply ensures American families who purchase flood insurance are covered if they sustain damage after the declaration of a flood in progress, the 30 days waiting period. This resolves the conflict caused between two government agencies and adheres to the intent. And I want to thank Financial Services Committee for including this in the en banc package and yield back my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Luchtenmeyer.
The gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd also like to thank the gentlelady from Illinois for her leadership on this important issue. I rise today in support of House Resolution 1309 and in support of my en bloc amendment that aims to provide for certainty to the National Flood Insurance Program. My amendment calls on FEMA to take into account the effects and implications of weather conditions when making a flood in progress determination. Currently, FEMA's flood determinations are made independently by a FEMA adjuster, allowing a significant amount of room for subjectivity. I appreciate the need for FEMA's flexibility, but taking a more formulaic approach to flood events will provide increased certainty to our river communities. My amendment would also require FEMA to review the process for providing for public notification of a flood event. When the Missouri River started flooding earlier this summer, FEMA was delinquent in reporting their flood in progress determination to the public. That determination was made June 1st, but was not announced until June 6th. For 5 days, we had no way of knowing that FEMA had made this determination impacting policyholders and new home buyers. We believe that FEMA must look at the policies in place and make recommendations for a more objective and precise determination process, along with public notification standards that will keep policyholders better informed. It is critical that FEMA develop enhanced procedures for flood determinations and communications with the public. I urge support of my amendment and for the underlying bill. I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from California continues to reserve.
I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would recognize myself for such time as they may consume. You know, without the NFIP's authorization with this, it's set to expire on September 30th, and it's really critical that the House pass the bill and work with the Senate to shape a final common-sense reform measure. We have to avoid a recurrence of what happened in the last Congress when the program lapsed. It caused turmoil in a recovering housing market. Houses couldn't be closed if they didn't have insurance and if they had a mortgage. And at that time it was simply extended without any reform. So if there's no viable private insurance market, we're going to have to pay more. So I would suggest that we really look forward to passing this bill. And with that, I would recognize the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Ross-Layton, for 2 minutes.
Well, I thank the gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairman, and I'd like to thank my good friend from Illinois for the time. She's been a wonderful advocate on behalf of homeowners and renters of the United States, and especially in my area. So, Madam Chair, I rise in support of this bill to reauthorize the National Flood Insurance Program as administered by FEMA through the year 2016. Granted, the bill before us is not perfect, but homeowners and businesses in my congressional district that stretches from Miami Beach all the way down to Key West, they deserve to see stability brought to this vital program. Since September of 2008, the NFIP has had 11 short-term extensions, and just last year alone, the program was allowed to lapse 3 times. That is inexcusable. These lapses meant that FEMA was not able to write new policies, renew expiring policies, or increase coverage limits. And for a program that insures over 90% of all flood insurance policies nationwide, 40% of those being in my home state of Florida, this is rightfully inexcusable. Just as bad, for each of the 53 days that the NFIP was lapsed, over 1,400 home buyers who wanted to purchase homes located in floodplains were unable to close on their home purchases. It is necessary to demonstrate these irresponsible lapses will not occur again. And those of us in South Florida and the Miami Beach area to the Keys will stay prepared for any event that could occur during hurricane season, which is upon us again. And we need to know that the NFIP is there to help us recover. Let us not let another lapse happen right in the middle of hurricane season, and I urge my colleagues to join me in voting for this much-needed, way overdue, important reauthorization. I know my time is up, and I thank the gentlelady for the time, and let's pass this bill. Thank you.
The gentlewoman from California
I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
Madam Chairman, if I might inquire again how much time we have remaining.
The gentlewoman from Illinois has 10 minutes remaining, and the gentlewoman from California has 11.5 minutes remaining.
All right. With that, then, I would yield to our distinguished chairman of the Financial Services Committee from Alabama, 9 minutes.
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 9 minutes.
I thank the chairman. Chairman, this month we're all focused on the debt and the deficit and our negotiations to try to balance the budget. So it's with great pride that I tell the House that all 54 members of the Financial Services Committee, both Republicans and Democrats, have brought before the committee unanimously, we passed out of the committee, a bipartisan piece of legislation which will save the U.S. government and the American taxpayers $4.2 billion over the next 10 years. It does that without decreasing any of the benefits of the program. It does it in some common sense ways. One is that premiums will be actuarially sound. They'll be based on the risk, and we will be eliminating subsidies to bring the program into balance. We further insulate taxpayers from losses by a reinsurance provision whereby part of the premium that people pay, just as if they do on their house or wind coverage, if they have a home on the beach, part of it is in private insurance laid off into reinsurance. The risk, instead of being the program today, if you eat up the reserves, then the Treasury is responsible for making up the difference. After this legislation goes into effect, there'll be reinsurance that will be purchased, and the taxpayer will only be exposed after risk-based premiums are exhausted. Reinsurance, in addition to that, is exhausted, and so we reduce taxpayer exposure to a tremendous extent. We also, people have said, why is there not private insurance? Well, we have a provision in here supported by both parties that if the private market comes in and offers insurance for the same coverage, that people will be free to choose that coverage as opposed to the national flood insurance offered by the government. You heard the gentlelady from Florida express her concern that 11 times this legislation has been extended. Where it has been extended, it has retarded economic growth along our coastlines, along our rivers, and you can actually imagine that a lot of the economic activity and the job creation in our country comes in these areas. And today, I think there would be no one in the House that says we want to put the economies of those areas on hold for 3 months or 6 months. We want the economy to have much less problems. We don't want to stop home sales. We don't want to stop commercial developments in those areas. There are other shortcomings with the present program. One is there are disputes over whether or not land should be included within floodplains, whether it should be coverage should be offered. We make improvements there. We returned to a program several years ago where there's a technical advisory program committee that, in addition to FEMA, will make these decisions. And it'll be a more professional-based decision. Those areas which are spending money, local areas like Los Angeles, California, Miss Waters District, along the Mississippi River, where local governments have come together and made expenditures to protect against floods. There's acknowledgement of their work, and the phase-in period for them is extended to encourage more of that. All in all, I think that that I would just go back to where I started and say that the Financial Services Committee is no different from any other committee in this House. There are conservatives, there are liberals, there are moderates that serve on that committee, both Republicans and Democrats. But all 54 members, let me stress that again, all 54 members of the Financial Services Committee voted unanimously for this legislation. And we are prepared in our debate as we go forward to accept amendments offered by several other members, both Democrats and Republicans, to accept those amendments where it does not do violence to the program, where it doesn't increase cost or exposure to the taxpayer. All in all, I want to congratulate the chairman of the subcommittee who produced this legislation. I think our constituents for months have been saying to the Congress, please set aside your political differences. Please try to work together. Please try to cooperate when you can do so without violating your principles. And Ms. Biggert and Ms. Waters, the subcommittee member on her side, they put aside their differences. I worked with Chairman Frank. We had hearings, we had markups, and we produced something that I thought was not possible. And that's a bill that we all think will improve the program tremendously, will reduce the cost, and reduce taxpayer exposure, and really make the mapping better, and the protection for our communities in flood-prone areas work more effectively. So with that, I will reserve the balance of our time, and I understand there may not be any other speakers, but and with that, I think I will yield back or I'll reserve my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman, is the gentlewoman from California prepared to close?
Madam Chair, I will close at this point.
The woman's recognized.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you very much. I am very pleased and proud to be a co-sponsor of this tremendous comprehensive legislation. I would like to thank the chairwoman from Illinois, Ms. Biggert, for her work, her leadership, and her cooperation. And I'd like to thank both the chairman of our committee, Mr. Bacchus, and the ranking member, Mr. Frank, for their support and their cooperation on this legislation. You heard Mr. Bacchus, our chairman, recount for you that 54 members of the committee unanimously voted to support this legislation. That is pretty unheard of, and I think that the committee, the entire committee, is to be congratulated for the tremendous work that we all put into making sure that we have comprehensive legislation that would afford protection for our citizens, at the same time, as was mentioned, reduce the costs, but recognize that this has been a long time in coming. So, as a co-sponsor of this bill, H.R. 1309, the Flood Insurance Reform Act of 2011, this bipartisan effort that has brought us to this point, I would like to say that all of the members who have spoken today, for the most part, on both sides of the aisle, have been complimentary of this comprehensive work. Of course, we did have one member who disagreed with government's involvement in this flood insurance program. That's a rather radical view. I think most members of this Congress believe that we have a responsibility to give support to those who are the victims of natural disaster, disasters that have been caused through, of course, no fault of their own, and they're pleased that they have an opportunity to get some protection with the help of their government, and to make sure that their homes and their families can be supported at a time that can be very traumatic in their lives. Again, I'll have to remind all of my colleagues that unfortunately the lack of a long-term authorization has placed the flood insurance program at risk. The program lapsed 3 times last year. These lapses meant that FEMA was not able to write new policies, renewing expiring policies, or increase coverage limits. Today, you have heard the members of Congress, again, on both sides of the aisle, give appreciation for the mapping reform that we have included in this legislation, for the outreach that we have included in this unblock amendment that would allow the constituents of all of our districts to understand better what FEMA is doing, how it's doing, and how they can be a part of it. I'm also pleased that included in this unblock amendment is protection for small businesses. And I'm very, very pleased that we have seen this as an effort not only to reauthorize, but to correct some of the weaknesses in the program and to strengthen the program in general. And with that, Madam Chair, I would ask for support for this bill. I know that there are some amendments that are being introduced a little bit later on, and I think that, again, you will see bipartisan support for most of these amendments, and I look forward to completing the bill with the amendments and to sending this bill on where I believe we will have like support on the Senate side and eventually to the President's desk. It's about time, and I think that this country is going to be better off for it. With that, I will yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 2.5 minutes, the remaining balance of her time.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would, first of all, submit for the record 2 industry letters, one dated June 30th, 2011, and the other one dated May 27th, 2011.
This will be covered under general leave.
With that, Madam Chairman, I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1309, and it's a bill to reform and reauthorize the National Flood Insurance Program. I think that we've had a great debate, and it certainly is a pleasure to have a bill that has such bipartisan support. And I think it's such an important bill. And it's going to enact a series of reforms designated to improve NFIB's financial stability, reduce the burden on taxpayers, restore integrity to the FEMA mapping system, and explore ways to increase the private market participation and help bring certainty to the housing market. It's a $4.2 billion revenue raiser, and I think that that's very important too, that we will really be able to change the scope of this. If we go back to 1968 when this started, there was no private insurance, and this is why this happened. And we have to keep it that way, or we will pay so much more for disaster relief when this happens to so many people who live in floodplains. So I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I really thank the members of the Financial Services Committee, particularly Ms. Waters and Mr. Frank, and on our side, Mr. Bacchus, the chairman. And if I have, do I have any time remaining?
The gentlewoman has 1 minute remaining.
And with that, I see another member of our committee who I would just like to leave the 1 minute for, Mr. Dole of Illinois.
Mr. Dole is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I do want to talk about the flood insurance program, one that I think enjoys great bipartisan support. I want to thank the chairwoman for her guidance, and obviously Ms. Waters for her leadership as well. 5 million, actually, residential and commercial properties across the land rely on this flood insurance. They depend on it for stability, and we have to recognize that there indeed are problems. We have debt. There's no question about that. It's undercapitalized, which are placing the taxpayers at risk. But this bill would minimize taxpayer risk by making the program more self-sufficient over time by expanding the private sector's role while allowing and not allowing for coverage gaps. It also moves towards actuarially sound rates, creates a new flooding map, which creates a platform upon which risks can be measured and priced by the private sector. This is exactly the kind of solution that we need to have here in the United States Congress to be able to still provide coverage in areas that need it so desperately and yet move us gradually over to actuarially sound rates. With that, I yield back and thank the gentlelady for her leadership.
The gentleman's time has expired. All time for debate has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois rise?
Madam Chairman, I move that the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises. Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 1309, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 1309 and has come to no resolution thereon. Pursuant to House Resolution 337 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the further consideration of H.R. 2354. Would the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, kindly take the chair?
The House is in the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 2354, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill making appropriations for energy and water development and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes.
When the Committee of the Whole rose on Monday, July 11, 2011, the bill had been read through page 24, line 23. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in the congressional record on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. An amendment by Mr. Sessions of Texas, an amendment by Mr. Moran of Virginia, an amendment by Mr. Markey of Massachusetts, amendment number 5 by Mr. Lamborn of Colorado, an amendment by Mr. Connolly of Virginia, an amendment by Mr. Miller of North Carolina, an amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, an amendment by Mr. Welch of Vermont, an amendment by Mr. Pompeo of Kansas, an amendment by Mr. Tonko of New York, an amendment by Mr. Garrett of New Jersey, an amendment by Mr. Wu of Oregon, an amendment by Mr. McClintock of California, an amendment by Mr. Schiff of California, an amendment by Mr. Garamendi of California. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Sessions of Texas.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device.
The House began the day working on a bill that reauthorizes flood insurance programs, federal flood insurance programs, through 2016. They will return to work on that bill in the form of many amendments to consider this afternoon. First, though, they're going back to amendments to the 2012 spending bill for energy and water programs, $31 billion spending bill, the fifth of 12 spending bills for 2012 that the House has considered. 15 amendment votes here. And this first one is 15 minutes. It's a Pete Sessions amendment, which would strike language from the bill prohibiting the outsourcing of federal positions within the Corps of Engineers. All of the remaining amendment votes in this series will be 2-minute votes. So 15 minutes of amendments, and then the House will again resume work on flood insurance with a number of amendments to consider there. By the way, Pete Sessions' Texas colleague Congressman Ron Paul, announced today that he will retire from Congress in 2012. He's saying he's going to focus on the presidential run in 2012. Quoting Congressman Paul, he said, "I think you have more credibility if you run for only one office at a time." Also today, later this afternoon, the President will welcome negotiators back to the White House for another session on the debt and deficit. And we also expect to hear from Senator Mitch McConnell in just a little bit on the Senate's position on the negotiations so far. We heard from House GOP leaders earlier today. The Republicans held their caucus this morning, and leaders came out after that meeting to talk about this afternoon's session. We'll show that to you during this 15-minute vote.
American people know we have a debt crisis, not because they are undertaxed. It's because this president and previous Democratic Congresses have spent too much. We look at the government takeover of our health care, over $1 trillion. The president's failed stimulus plan, $1.2 trillion with interest. Garden variety government, known as non-defense discretionary, up 24% in just 2 years, an unparalleled spending spree that has helped run this economy in the ditch, leaving millions of unemployed. And the president's answer? Let's raise taxes on job creators. Mr. President, the American people don't want that. Mr. President, that will not work. Besides tax increases on job creators, we've seen no real plan out of the president. As the head of the Congressional Budget Office has said, we cannot estimate a speech. We can only estimate a plan. House Republicans have led with a budget that dealt with a debt crisis that this president and the previous Democratic Congress has made far, far worse. 100% of the problem is on the spending side. 100% of the solution has to come from the spending side.
You know, my message to the White House over the last several months has been real simple. The spending cuts have to be larger than the increase in the debt ceiling. Secondly, there are no tax increases on the table. And thirdly, we have to have real controls in place to make sure this never happens again. Real controls like a balanced budget amendment. But the fact is that House Republicans have a plan. We passed our budget back in the spring, outlined our priorities. Where's the budgets? Where's the president's plan? When's he going to lay his cards on the table? This debt limit increase is his problem, and I think it's time for him to lead by putting his plan on the table, something that the Congress can pass.
Good morning. You know, the President has talked over the last day or so about the need to try and address the big problem, which are the entitlement programs, specifically health care entitlements and their trajectory. And, you know, it's gratifying to see that the President joins us in feeling we've got to do something about it. Because as the Chairman just said, when Chairman Hensling said we were the ones who came forward and said, you know what, we're going to put health care entitlements in our budget because we believe this is how you get the fiscal house in order. So I appreciate the President saying that we need to do something about the long-term health of our country and entitlements. I appreciate the fact that he thinks that he's got some prescriptions to do so. What I don't understand is why in the world would the President then tie that to tax increases? if it's the right thing to do for the country, why is he tying it into imposing greater costs on the people of this country at a time they can least deal with that?
You all know the point in time of where we are. And in a short time frame, in half a year, Republicans have been in the majority. They've laid out a budget that actually is on paper of how they can save the entitlement programs for future generations. We've watched this job list under this President and his administration continue to rise. This is a unique opportunity for us to correct the problem. So as our Speaker and leader goes down and continue to work with this President to try to find a current form that we can change our spending habits, you'll find on the week of the 18th, on this floor, we will bring up for long term a balanced budget amendment. You want to make sure we don't get into this problem again. 16 years ago, this country came one vote shy of having a balanced budget. Had that passed, we would not be where we are today. So as we go to solve our problem today, let's also look to the future. Because as every American realizes, when you look to your family, it's not what you will become, it's what your children will become. And this is our opportunity, our window as one nation, to solve the problem long term.
Our conference just had a great discussion about the future of America, and we talked about our commitment to doing what's good and right for America, because we believe that this is a critical time, that the debt that we've taken on as a country is unsustainable, and that it threatens our economic future, it threatens those opportunities for our children and our grandchildren. Now, yesterday, the President came out and said we needed to take the Band-Aid off, we needed to eat our peas, step up. You know, every step of the way, the House Republicans, this new majority, has been a part of the solution. We have put forward our budget. We've been sitting at the table. We've been negotiating in good faith. And I would say to the President right now, we need to put back on the table some of the items that he took off early on. He took off the balanced budget amendment early on. He took off changes to Obamacare, the repeal of Obamacare. We believe that those are part of the solution, and we want to put them back on the table and move forward in a way that is actually going to make sure that America gets its fiscal house in order and back on track.
Mr. Cantor, Mr. Cantor.
Mr. Speaker, you said that this is a time that Americans can least afford an increase in taxes. Isn't it also a time that they can least afford cuts in spending on social services?
If we don't fix the entitlement programs, they will not exist. The trustees have made clear there are serious deficiencies there. And we've got to make some big decisions to make sure that these programs that are important to tens of millions of Americans are there for the long term.
Mr. Cantor, President Obama has put raising the age to qualify for Medicare on the table. Essentially, we heard reports assigning you a homework assignment saying what sacred cows would Republicans touch. What sacred cows would Republicans be willing to touch within these debt negotiations?
Again, Luke, I want to say again, we all agree that we've got to do something about the long-term trajectory of the entitlement programs, and we've got to fix them for the health of this country. And it is unfathomable to me why our President thinks that he's got to condition any prescription to fix these programs on tax increases. Again, if that's what he's looking for, we're not going there, because right now this economy is ailing. And we don't believe, nor do I think the American people believe, that raising taxes is the answer for what's vexing most people in this country is the lack of jobs and growth. So let's fix the entitlements, like the President said, without raising taxes. Then we can focus on the issues that he would like to focus on, and we would like to focus on, which is our tax code. But why does he insist on raising taxes when we're trying to fix the health of this country?
What do Republicans feel pain here?
Mr. Speaker.
Just on the Senate floor a few minutes ago, Leader McConnell said that he doesn't think that a deal can be cut with this President in the Oval Office. During your remarks yesterday, you were very complimentary of the President and you enjoyed his company. Do you agree with your leader on the other side of the building?
Well, finding an agreement certainly has been elusive. You know, the Biden group led talks with Eric, did a good job representing our caucus. Those talks went on for about 7 weeks.
Now, I've been in conversations with the President for the last couple of months, and clearly the last couple of weeks in a serious way. The President talks a good game, but when it comes time to actually putting these issues on the table, making decisions, they can't quite pull the trigger. Listen, I was born with a glass half full. I'm the optimist. I'm going to continue to be the optimist that we can do the right thing for the country.
Mr. Speaker, you say you want to reach a deal. You say it's important. Everyone in the room says the same thing. But the President says Republicans have to make concessions to move this ball forward. Where are these concessions?
I don't know why he believes that it's going to be any easier for Republicans than Democrats to make these tough decisions in terms of reducing spending. Washington has a spending problem. We don't have a revenue problem. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, are interparty politics making it harder to reach a deal?
And Speaker Boehner will be at the White House later this afternoon. 3:45 is the announced time for the debt and deficit meeting with President Obama. We should hear from Senator McConnell soon. He'll be speaking during the party caucus after the party lunches at about 2 o'clock Eastern. Then look for coverage online at cspan.org, also possibly on C-SPAN 2 ahead of the Senate coming back in. Here in the House, they are voting on 15 amendments to the Energy and Water Development Bill for fiscal year 2012. This is the first amendment. It's a 15-minute vote. All of the following 14 will be 2-minute votes. Well, earlier today, Representative Lynn Woolsey, who just a couple of weeks ago announced her planned retirement in 2012, made her 400th speech on the House floor, calling for bringing troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan. I want to show you those floor comments by Lynn Woolsey as this vote continues.
Madam Speaker, in April of the year 2004, my staff came to me with a memo asking if I wanted to give a special order speech on some issue that I can't remember the subject. My answer at that time was no, I didn't want to speak on that issue. But I did want to deliver a 5-minute speech that day and every day thereafter when it was possible to express my opposition to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and my belief that there is a smarter way to achieve our national security goals. And so, Madam Speaker, since that day, I've stood here in this spot to say over and over again that these wars are eroding our spiritual core, bankrupting us morally and fiscally, teaching our children that warfare is the new normal. I have delivered these speeches as a member of the majority and the minority, when the President was a member of my party and when he was not, and today I am doing it for the 400th time. When I began, the war in Iraq was still quite popular, as was the President who launched it. But we spoke out anyway, refusing to bend on principle because we knew that we did not belong there. My colleagues, Representative Barbara Lee and Representative Maxine Waters and I, we called ourselves the Triad, started the Out of Iraq Caucus, and we forced the first House vote to bring our troops home. Along the way, I visited Iraq. I tried, and I learned on that trip, and my opinion was confirmed against that very war, but at the same time, it increased my admiration for our troops. Gradually, the tide of public opinion has turned. President Bush lost the confidence of the American people and eventually had to start winding down the war. I don't believe that would have happened unless a few lonely voices had dared to be heard in those early days. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but I'm also very frustrated, because nearly a decade after the first American boots hit the ground in Afghanistan, here we are, still at war, still occupying sovereign countries on missions that aren't making us safer or advancing our interests. The cost has been devastating. Over 6,100 Americans are dead. Thousands more civilians have died for the cause of their so-called liberation. Thousands of U.S. service members have come home but may never be the same, either because of physical wounds or mental health trauma, which can, with the physical and the mental health, destroy lives just as well. In addition to the staggering $3.2 trillion price tag that has piled up over the last 10 years, I don't think we've even begun to come to grips with the resources that the VA will need for the next 50 or so years to meet the responsibility we have to our veterans as a result of these wars. Madam Speaker, you know I've said it over and over again that I'm not suggesting we abandon the people of Afghanistan and Iraq. Anti-war doesn't mean anti-engagement or anti-security. The underlying principle behind my 400 speeches has been that we need a completely different approach to protecting America, one that emphasizes diplomacy, reconciliation, and peaceful conflict resolution. From the beginning, I've been pushing my own solution called smart security, fighting terrorism with better intelligence, with a stronger nuclear non-proliferation program, with humanitarian and economic aid that will give hope to the people around the world, with less spending on weapons systems and more on homeland security, human rights monitoring, and energy independence. Most importantly, smart security insists that war is an absolute last resort. Because, Madam Speaker, for the sake of the future of the human race, we must and we can figure out a way to resolve our differences without resorting to war and violence. I will continue to do this for the remaining year and a half that I will be in Congress, giving as many of these speeches as I can. And, Madam Speaker, I will not rest until we finally bring our troops home and we adopt a smart security approach to preventing war and preserving peace, so that my grandchildren and your grandchildren and their grandchildren will have a peaceful, productive world to live in the future.
Lynn Woolsey of California earlier today, that's her 400th House floor speech specifically on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the military action in Libya. And you'll soon find that, in addition to over 1,000 other appearances in the House and elsewhere of Lynn Woolsey, in our video library at cspanvideo.org, or link right off of cspan.org. And by the way, the President this afternoon will hold a Medal of Honor ceremony. He's awarding the Congressional Medal of Honor to an Afghanistan war veteran, Sergeant First Class Leroy Arthur Petrie, for courageous actions in combat in May of 2008. He will be the second living active duty service member to be awarded the Medal of Honor for actions in Afghanistan or Iraq. Our C-SPAN cameras will be covering that event later at the White House. Also, just to let you know, this is the first of 15 votes on the House floor. These are 15 amendments to the Energy and Water Bill of 2012, the spending bill for 2012. This first amendment, Pete Sessions of Texas, would strike language in the bill prohibiting the outsourcing of federal positions within the Corps of Engineers. This is a 15-minute vote, and all of the following 14 amendments will get 2-minute votes.
this vote, the yeas are 224 and the nays are 196. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.